Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your patience. Welcome to the Chamber of Commerce Southern New Jersey's virtual Wells Fargo Good Morning South Jersey event. Today's virtual event is an all-out small business resource center targeted to Cumberland, Salem, and Gloucester County businesses. Thank you all so much for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christina Renna, and I am the President and CEO of the Chamber. We are so proud to partner with the following organizations today, all of which may help make today's program a reality. The Bridgeton Area Chamber of Commerce, the Cumberland County Improvement Authority, Gloucester County Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Millville Chamber of Commerce, the Salem County Chamber of Commerce, and the Greater Vineland Chamber of Commerce. So to Tony, Kim, Janet, Jerry, Jennifer, and Dawn, thank you all for your support and your friendship. Before we begin, I have to start, of course, by thanking the exclusive sponsor of the Chamber's Good Morning South Jersey series, Wells Fargo. And a very special thank you to our good friend, John Zimmerman, who's the regional bank president, and of course, the entire Wells Fargo team. Wells Fargo has supported this series for over 20 years with the Chamber, and we truly, as always, appreciate your support. The lineup we have for today truly allows you to hear from all the major players that are providing resources to small businesses amid the COVID-19 crisis. It's a great opportunity for you to not only get information and some really timely information, but also ask questions of today's guests, and I definitely encourage you to do so. So a few housekeeping items before we begin. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Tim Sullivan, the CEO of NJEDA, who will speak first and give some remarks. Then we're going to cycle through the rest of today's speakers, as has been publicized to you. As everyone speaks, the chat function at the bottom of your screen will be open. So if a question comes to mind as any of our speakers are speaking, go ahead and put it in the chat. I will be collecting them, and we're going to have one collective Q&A session after we get through the entire round of speakers. If you can, when you do ask your question, if it's for one specific person, do note that. It makes it a lot easier for me to be able to allocate the questions out once we get to that Q&A session. And then, of course, at the end of the program, we're going to get to as many questions as we can. If we don't get to them all, don't worry, we'll still capture those questions and try to get you answers on the back end. And as always, we will survey all of our attendees today, so we'd love to know your thoughts on what you thought of today's program. But again, if something comes to mind after the program concludes, feel free to type in that question in the survey as well. And again, we'll make sure we get it to the right people. So with those housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started. First, we're going to hear from, as I mentioned, the CEO of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, Tim Sullivan. Tim has some really exciting new news out of EDA that just broke on Friday that he's going to walk through. So I'm going to turn the program over to Tim to start us off and give remarks. Tim, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Christina. Good morning to you. Good morning to everybody on the call. Appreciate the chance to be with you. I feel like we're doing this so often. I feel like the guy from the zoo who goes on Tonight Show. I need like new jokes and new animals to be with you, Christina, just to, keep it fresh, make sure I've got fresh material. This time I do. I've got a new grant program to talk about. So we've got some new material. Thank you again, in all sincerity, to Christina and the team at the South Jersey Chamber for having us and for doing so many of these with us. Great to be with the 6 chambers that are partnering Christina and her team this morning. Really appreciate the chance to be on with 3 counties all at once. 3 of my very favorite 21, 3 of my very favorite counties among the 21. Deeply appreciate the chance to visit with you. So wanted to talk a little about where we are in the economic relief package. This is something Governor Murphy has been really focused on and prioritizing all throughout the crisis, because first and foremost, this is a public health crisis, and the human suffering that we're seeing across the state, in every corner of the state, and being felt disproportionately by communities of color and under historically underrepresented communities generally is staggering. The death toll is more than anyone could have possibly contemplated even just a few months ago, both nationally here in New Jersey. But importantly, it's important to keep in mind, in addition to a public health crisis, this is an economic crisis, and it's thrown us into a recession virtually overnight, and into a far deeper recession than any of us have ever seen in our lifetime. And we used to say that about the Great Recession, that it was the worst recession of our lifetime, and we continue to unfortunately be breaking new ground here. So the governor has been, while focusing on the public health crisis, also really trying to focus as much resources and time and attention as we can on the small business dimension of this, because this is a general economic crisis, but it's really aggressively and acutely a small business crisis. We have seen on main streets, from south to north, east and west, all throughout the state, incredible hardship, whether it's being forced to be closed under executive orders or whether it's just seeing a significant reduction in your customers, whether it's having to work from home and trying to run a service-based business in a context in which folks don't want you in their home. It's just incredibly hard. An unprecedented challenge for small business. And so we've stood up a suite of tools at the EDA on a sort of emergency kind of rapid relief basis to do our best to help. So with that, can we advance to the next slide? I don't know who's got Stephanie who has the slides. Thanks, Stephanie. Or Randy, I'm not sure who's got slides, but whoever, just advance them. Thank you. So again, real principles here. First of all, we recognize here that anything we do at the state level, even with support from the federal government, the need is going to vastly surpass the resources. This is we've seen federal programs that are capitalized with hundreds of billions of dollars be oversubscribed at the national level, because that's how deep and acute the pain is. But our principles of how we've thought about how do we want to organize programs: one, get funding out as soon as possible, and I have some good news to share about that in a little bit. Two, leverage other people's money, federal, private, philanthropic capital, to scale our program. So if we can develop a program that works and it has some scalability, it can be expanded over time. I think we've demonstrated that, and the governor's demonstrated that. We had a first round of grant funding, and then we just announced a second round, which I'll talk about more in a few minutes, because I think demonstrated we had the capacity in the system and the platform to do so. We also wanted to provide a variety of support. So yes, grants are important, but also we've heard lots of asks for zero interest loans, low cost loans, working with partners like Wayne and Harry and their great organizations to support their lending efforts, providing technical assistance into the marketplace. We really want to provide sort of a comprehensive set of services and solutions for small business. So the relief package that we're here to talk about this morning, again, really has 5 or 6 different components. This emergency assistance grant program, which I'll spend a few minutes on in a moment. The emergency assistance loan program, which we took applications for a few weeks ago and is pretty oversubscribed. Programs to support and mobilize capital, either through our partners at the CDFIs, folks like Wayne and Harry and their colleagues, the emergency assistance guarantee, and an entrepreneur support program, which again I'll talk about in a moment, to support equity funded startups as well, because they've been struggling mightily through this. And then some technical assistance and credit flexibility as well through the EDA's lending activities. Next slide, please. So grant program. So people love grants. Not surprisingly, we did back at the very early part of April, we announced an application for a $5 million pot of funding that was available for businesses up to 10 employees with a maximum of $5,000 per applicant. Those funds were exhausted within 45 minutes of the application going open. We had 34,000 applications for a program that could fund, at the high end, maybe 2,000 applications. And this program was actually augmented by $2 million for Atlantic County that CREDA, the CRDA, put in. That program was oversubscribed almost instantaneously. The governor announced a week and a half ago that he was going to allocate $50 million of federal money into our small business programs. We just announced last week, and our board approved, as Christina mentioned, additional funding into the backlog or the pipeline of applications we had from phase 1. So of the $50 million, we put 5 against the folks that were waitlisted in phase 1. And that's everyone. If you've been following that closely, we basically given people 3 kind of responses so far. 1, we said you're approved. 2, we said you're in your application's on file. We're going to review it, and if additional funding becomes available, you'll hopefully get funded. You're on the wait list. There's a third bucket, which is still in the tens of thousands of applications of folks. We basically said, we have your application. This is your spot in line. I wouldn't hold out a lot of hope that you're going to get funded, because it's beyond the scope of this program. So we're going to be able to fund, we think, everybody in that second category, the waitlisted category. And in fact, just yesterday, our team pushed out grant award notifications to a little more than 700 businesses that were on the wait list, that they'd gotten approval for their funds, and we'll start moving that money as soon as today by electronic funds transfer. Coincidentally, the sponsor of this program, Wells Fargo, happens to be our bank for this, so they've been great in moving money quickly with us. Um, so that's some good news. There's another $2.6 million left of that $5 million that'll get pushed out over the next couple of days and weeks to sort of conclude round one. We're going to then do round two. I think I have the next slide for that. Yes. So round two, phase two of the grant program. And this is the really exciting big news that Christina was mentioning earlier. Our board approved on Friday a new $45 million grant program that's expanded quite a bit in scope and scale. Most importantly, it's 9 times larger than the first program, so it's expanded in scope and scale quite a bit. We've also made some improvements, both in response to feedback from folks like the chambers, as well as advocates for micro business and home-based businesses and sole proprietorships, to expand the eligibility of the program. So it's up to 25 employees now, with a cap of $10,000 per application. Home-based businesses are eligible. Sole proprietorships are now eligible. And we've gotten rid of the industry restrictions that had been in place the first time. The first time around, we really focused on folks like retail and restaurants and service businesses that were the very hardest hit. Lots of folks are hard hit. We get that. And now we think basically 10, 11, 12 weeks into this, whatever it's been, virtually everyone is hard hit at this point. And so we dropped the industry restrictions. I saw a question in the chat around 501c6s. That's a federal prohibition, something called the Stafford Act. I learned all about this in the last couple of weeks. Prohibits federal money from going to any organizations that are permitted to engage in political electioneering activity. So 501c6s are not eligible to receive federal funding. This is federally funded, so they're not in here. But 501c3s, C4s, and C7s are now in. Importantly, we want to put a really intentional lens of equity and inclusion around this. We are going to reserve, of this $45 million, we're going to reserve 1/3 or $15 million for businesses that are located in opportunity zone eligible census tracts. Just a reminder on this, there's 169 opportunity zone census tracts throughout the state. Those are the ones that the governor in early 2018, one of the very first economic development related things he did when he took office was he had the opportunity to designate opportunity zones, thanks to the bill that was championed by Senator Booker, or the component of the tax bill that was championed by Senator Booker. This is the full list of the 750 or so eligible census tracts that could have been designated. These are high poverty, low income, high unemployment census tracts all throughout the state. They're in all 21 counties, and there's a map that we can talk about later to show you where you are on those. But we're reserving 1/3 of the money in this second round for businesses that are located there. So at least 15 million, at least 15 million will go to businesses located in those opportunity zone eligible census tracts, which we think will mean a much higher participation and availability of funds for minority-owned firms, women-owned firms. Lots of sole proprietors are located there. Something like 90 to 95% of minority-owned firms are sole proprietorships. And so this is going to, we think, dramatically expand the availability of funds for those sets of businesses. That's really important. Something we're eager to see how that goes. I don't think any other state in the country is doing this kind of lens of using the opportunity zone framework in its grant programs. Next slide, please. The aforementioned map. So the $15 million. Every county has one. The 3 counties we're on with right now certainly all are in that category. We're also going to be providing language access services. The application, when we publish it, we're looking at probably June 8th or 9th. When we publish that application, will be available both in English and in Spanish. We're going to have language assistance available for 9 additional languages that are listed on the slide here. I won't go through the detail. And then all of the new applications will be available again in Spanish and in English. This is really, I think, an important part of the equity and accessibility strategy that Governor Murphy and our entire team are focused on. Next slide, please. We also have the loan program. Again, I won't spend a ton of time on this because it's been oversubscribed quite a bit. But this is a 0 interest loan up to 10 years. Interest free for the first 5, low interest for the back half. We're in the process of approving those loans. We've approved about $1 million of those, $1 million worth of that part of the funding. But we got 240 million plus or minus of applications for $10 million there. looking to identify some additional sources of funding there. Unclear if that's something. The federal money, the guidance document for the federal money used the word grants very specifically. It did not use the word loans. And so not sure that we'll be able to use federal money for this at any point, but certainly looking for additional resources to focus on. Next slide, please. I'm going to hand it here to Cristina Fuentes, who does tons of things around the EDA, but importantly leads our small business effort and works really closely with the CDFIs, talk about a really innovative program that we stood up as part of this. Cristina?
Okay, thank you. So one of the ways that EDA look to leverage our resource partners like the CDFIs, which are the true partners and micro lenders that are community based, they're community development financial institutions, and without really kind of utilizing our true dollars, we did a $10 million reserve on our balance sheet, which allowed them to opt into this program to create their own COVID related working capital products. So each of these entities were able to create their own product, and they already had the underwriting staff, and they did their own application process. And as you can see to the right of the slide, that their individual product had to really encompass these parameters. And so each of our 6 partners essentially created their own product that they're putting out there, and Wayne and also Harry will mention those today and highlight what those products are, will be, and how people can really utilize them. And what EDA did was we essentially said to these partners that, we will cover each loan up to 50% if they default in the future. And that allows the CDFIs to be a little bit more comfortable with doing some riskier loans during this pandemic time where everybody's in such great need. So we're hoping that, we're trying to just really spread the coverage and the leverage and utilizing our partners the best way we can. And we really appreciate them for doing that. That's it.
Great. If you can give me the next slide, please. So again, we're going to hear from 2 of these great 6th grade organizations in a moment, in Harry and Wayne, and talk about their programs. Because again, we really wanted to focus on how do we expand our Army. Our reach is going to be what it is, and we're limited by being a statewide government organization. Our partners at the CDFIs are really extraordinary partners in all this, and so excited to. I will not steal their thunder from both Harry and Wayne about the programs they're running. Deeply appreciative of Cristina Fuentes and her leadership for in running these programs. Next slide, please. Last thing I'll mention programmatically here is an entrepreneur support program. So, we've been focused on the state of innovation strategy that the governor's been focused on since day one. These are thinking about young companies that are pre-profit and often pre-revenue, that are unable to access bank capital or lending capital of any sort. Wanted to be able to create a mechanism to provide some support for them. This is an application that we're still taking. It's a $5 million program. This is essentially an 80% loan guarantee. If you've got third-party investors who are willing to float you some loan capital, we will do an 80% guarantee on that with some warrant coverage and warrant protection, up to for businesses under 25 people and under 5 million in revenue, and a bunch of other bells and whistles as you look under the hood of the details there. But this is a really good interest in this program. It's not oversubscribed. We're still taking applications, and it's a little bit more bespoke. It's not a generally available program. You have to have, again, third-party investors. You've got to have 50% of your employees in 50% of your employees in New Jersey, and a few other characteristics. But this is, again, something I think no other state is doing as part of their COVID response, to be able to support not just to support it, with some precision, lots of different types of small businesses. So please check this application out if that's something you're interested in. Next slide, please. Technical assistance, again, we want to really be making sure that we're supporting businesses all throughout the state, and lots of different communities, particularly historically underserved communities, access our programs, and really importantly, access the SBA programs. God love the SBA. Nothing but appreciation and admiration for the programs they're running, but they are federal programs, and they can be sometimes difficult to access, even for the best prepared and best resourced organizations. So we entered into contracts, and again, something Christina's leading for us, with 4 different organizations around the state to try and make sure that we're providing some technical support for particularly communities of color, veterans, entrepreneurs. So we're working with the African American Chamber of Commerce, the Statewide Veterans Chamber, Statewide Hispanic Chamber, the Rising Tide Capital Group out of Jersey City that supports entrepreneurs. to help people prepare their applications. And this has, I think, been a pretty successful program. It's not just for their members, by the way. So if you're and not just for, it's for anyone who wants to work with those organizations. They are providing free application support funded by the EDA. So this is something we're excited about as well. Next slide, please. I think it's getting to be my last slides. We're also EDA is a bank. Inside we had a small business focus prior to COVID. It's only grown through this crisis, but we have a lending portfolio of a little more than 300 people that we're a direct lender to. We're following the governor's guidance, not just because he's the boss, but because it's the right thing to do, around being flexible, around providing payment moratoria, extending maturities, accepting subordinations if folks are piling on additional capital to get through this crisis. We're providing as much flexibility as we can through our lending portfolio. Next slide, please. We can skip this one. Let's go to the next slide, please. We know an eligibility wizard. We're in the process of updating this to add some of the new programs. This is a really good tool. If you go to cv.business.nj.gov, that's CV as in coronavirus.business.nj.gov, and it's a pretty easy wizard. You can enter in, I'm a business in X industry, and this is how many employees I have. This is how much revenue I have. Here's the program. It'll spit out some guidance on which programs you might be eligible for, whether those are EDA programs, federal programs, CDFI initiatives that folks like Wayne and Harry are running, things that other pockets of state or federal money that you might be eligible for. It's a really good tool. I'd encourage folks to check that out. It's being, again, continually refreshed as new programs get added here. So I would encourage folks to check that out. Next slide, please. And again, we also, as I mentioned earlier, and again, Christina is the expert on these things, but in sort of peacetime, prior to the COVID crisis, we had a whole suite of small business tools, all of which are still up and running. They're not quite as flexible and generous as a zero interest or a grant tool, but they are available and out there from our balance sheet, working through the micro business loan, the small business fund, or the direct loan program for working capital, for capital asset acquisition. Most of these are eligible for nonprofits as well as for-profits. And so I'd encourage you to check out EDA's website, which is njeda.com, and get information on all these application processes. We're happy to work with you through those programs as well. Next slide, please. We also launched, this is a really important one. This is something that has not gotten as much interest or much attention because it's not money, but it's really important. So PPE, personal protective equipment, going to be really important as sectors are permitted to reopen, as activities resume. Invariably, in any guidance that comes out from the CDC, from the health department, from county health, leaders, it's gonna center around PPE, and that's been in short supply through the peak of this crisis. It's still in short supply, but we've provided, lots of folks reached out to the state saying that they could sell PPE to the state, to the hospitals, to the state police, to whoever the relevant agency was. And we've basically turned that information and made it public, turned that around and made it public, so that if businesses are seeking to buy, particularly from wholesalers, large supplies of masks, of gowns, gloves, whatever the need is, there's over 1,000 registered businesses that are providing more than 2,500 products. That's not free; you have to buy them from them, but it's kind of a curated Craigslist, for lack of a better word, of PPE suppliers. Really important. This is on this coronavirus portal as well, so cv.business.nj.gov. You can see on the slide there is a whole paragraph of disclaimer language, which I should note because the lawyers will get mad at me if I don't. We're not saying you should buy from these vendors. We're not saying these are good vendors or bad vendors. We're not saying these are good or bad prices. We're not saying these are the right products for you to meet your guidance. We are providing information that's been provided to us and sharing it with the marketplace. And caveat emptor, proceed at your own risk, et cetera, et cetera. This is not something that Tim or Governor Murphy or anyone else is suggesting is a good thing or a bad thing to purchase, but these are products that are available on the marketplace. So with that, next slide, please. I'll just comment on this really briefly. There may be lots of questions about this. I've got the honor of being one of the 3 co-chairs of the Restart and Recovery Advisory Council. Christina Rena is an active member, of course, of these councils, as are a number of other folks that are probably on this call. We're having a call several calls every day with various committees of these groups to get advice for the governor, who ultimately has to make these decisions and advise the administration on matters that some of them are things that are going to have to be legislated, and work with legislative leadership to get as much input and feedback as we can from the business community. New Jersey's economy is as complex and diverse as any in the country, whether that's complexities with regional variations of, running a business in Cumberland County is different than running a business in Bergen County and Essex County. We get that. We have such a wide variety of industries. We have such a wide variety of sectors that are particularly reliant on density. We're the densest state in the union. So getting as much feedback as we can is really important. And so we've been actively engaged in that. This is incredible. Closing down was hard. Restarting is even harder. And so getting this right is really important. I can imagine I might get a couple of questions on this topic. Christina has been leading the charge on a number of important initiatives, particularly for South Jersey, and deeply appreciate her leadership and value her input. I'm sure she speaks on behalf of so many of you on this call. Next slide, please. Again, last thing I'd encourage you, just please do check out our websites, cv.business.nj.gov. Lots of great resources on there. Again, the wizard I mentioned, there's tons of FAQ information. The guidance is coming fast and furious on, new rule changes, things are permitted, things that were previously closed are now allowed to be open, those kinds of things, all being updated at cv.business.nj.gov in pretty real time. I would encourage you to please check that out. We also do have a jobs and hiring portal. There's more than 50 or 60,000 jobs that are available in industries that are responding to the crisis, that are hiring, things like delivery, grocery stores, healthcare, sanitation services, those kinds of businesses that are busier now than they were before. Most businesses are in the opposite scenario. These folks are busier than they were, and they're hiring. So I would encourage you to check out jobs.covid19.nj.gov. It's a really great resource that we stood up in partnership with the Labor Department and with the Office of Innovation. So it's a dynamic website that provides lots of good information. If you're looking for work, if folks you've had to let go are looking for work, at least on a temporary basis, I'm sure you want them back as soon as you can get them. But it's a good resource to check out. With that, I think I'm done. Next slide. I think that's my last slide, right? Either way, I'm going to stop talking because I think that's my last slide.
Annie, is that the last slide?
It is the last slide.
Okay,
yep.
great.
Okay,
Christina, back to you. Thanks so much for the chance to visit with you, and looking forward to taking some good questions in a few minutes.
Yep. Thank you so much, Tim, and Christina as well. Really exciting stuff coming out of EDA, and it's really great that, the first tranche of money that was put in, as you said, disappeared in minutes, I think quite literally. So it was great to see the second round and the expanded eligibility requirements for, really hitting some of the marks of some of the folks that were not eligible. This should, help widen that pool a bit, which will certainly help a lot of South Jersey businesses. So thanks, Tim and Christina, and we'll circle back with some questions at the end. So to all of you tuning in, it's great. We have over 100 people joining us today. Unfortunately, the Commissioner of the Department of Labor, Robert Angelo, an emergency popped up. He is unable to join us, but I did get some questions for him in advance. So if you did submit me a question, I already have the go-ahead. I'm going to get those questions over and get you answers. So if you are tuning in and have a question specifically for Department of Labor, feel free to throw it in the chat. I'm going to take them all and bring them right back to Department of Labor. And on behalf of the Commissioner, I do, apologize. I used to work in state government. I know these things happen as a member, of government pretty frequently. So we are fully understanding, but I did want to pass along his regrets. And like I said, please feel free to put any questions for him in the chat, and I'll make sure we get you answers on the back end. So since the Commissioner won't be joining us, we're going to skip down to Cheryl Painter, who is the New Jersey Lead Lender Relations Specialist for the U.S. SBA. And of course, whether it be an EIDL loan, the PPP, both fall under SBA. So it's great to have Cheryl with us to give us some updates. So Cheryl, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Sure. Good to be here today. I wanted to just I know there's been a lot of guidance out on PPP and the EIDL loans. And the EIDL disaster loans are being worked through. I'm hearing that we are starting as I said, to work through that. I am not actually in disaster. That is a separate department that processes those loans. I'm involved in more of the PPP loans, and those are currently still available. And I want to make sure that seasonal businesses out there know that they can qualify for any 12 weeks between up to September 15th for qualifying for a PPP loan. There are legislation in that it will potentially be passed to increase the forgiveness period from 8 weeks, and I'm seeing potentially 16 weeks, but I can't really comment until that's passed on what is going to look like. The forgiveness is currently at 75% of PPP funds being spent on payroll, but I'm seeing legislation that may be lowered. And I just want to encourage people, if they have any issues, to contact me. If they have a loan from a lender that they don't know, but another lender is declining them because they said that they're getting a kickback, I've been helping with that. There are ways to increase a PPP loan if you find out later that you were eligible for more money, especially based on the seasonal adjustments. And it is up until the first reporting of the lender, which is actually this Friday. So if you have something that you think should have been increased and are unclear what to do, you can contact me, but make sure you go to treasury.gov, and there's actually a link on how to calculate amounts. So you will know if you are indeed eligible for more money or not. Sometimes you think you are and you actually aren't, but it was pretty clear guidance. The loan forgiveness, there's more guidance that came out. Again, that's on treasury.gov website. And we are expecting more guidance to come on that as well. I think other than that, we can't really comment on on exact lenders or county information, but we are eager to get that out. So as soon as we get the go-ahead, we will release that information. And I have been making sure I've been keeping NJEDA especially in the loop on that. And I think that is it for my formal remarks.
Great. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And if anyone has any questions for Cheryl, there's a lot of folks that have, of course, applied for PPP or the EIDL loan. Things are, as you heard, a little bit in a state of flux right now, as DC folks do what DC folks do. But I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions. Cheryl, we did have one or two submitted in advance, so we'll get to that during the Q&A session. So thank you. Next up, we have Wayne Meyer, who is the president of the New Jersey Community Capital Group. Wayne will discuss who they are in case you're unfamiliar with them, and what they do as it relates to some flexible financing opportunities for small business. So Wayne, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Christina, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here today, and I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to allow me to discuss our Garden State Relief Fund, which is really designed to provide flexible and quick access to low-interest capital to both small businesses and nonprofits that have been negatively impacted by the crisis. And it's particularly a privilege for me to be here today because Cumberland, Gloucester, and Salem counties are really important markets for New Jersey Community Capital. Next slide, please. So New Jersey Community Capital, we are a 32-year-old nonprofit community development financial institution. We're certified by U.S. Treasury. We're a statewide organization. And our work is really designed to provide financing and investments to support not only neighborhood revitalization, but economic development in underserved communities throughout New Jersey. Next slide, please. Our work really focuses on two major guiding principles. The first is around building better places, and we try to do that by making investments into housing, into community facilities, educational facilities, economic development projects, arts and culture, thinking about all the building blocks of building a better place. But it's also about people, because in our view that without promoting economic mobility and equity as a desired social outcome, it's difficult to make progress. We try to devise our programs and services to accomplish both building better places, but simultaneously also providing opportunities for people. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, Cumberland, Gloucester, and Salem counties are important markets for New Jersey Community Capital. And back in 2015, we created what we call our Thrive South Jersey initiative, which was really led by a partnership with the Pascal Sykes Foundation and Fran Sykes. And the goal there was to really drive economic growth and create, jobs and catalyze small businesses in the region. And we developed a number of different products and services around lending, equity investments, other types of financing to support this work. And really, the philosophy was built on trying to think about how we can build on already the wonderful, economic assets within the region, but also how can we attract innovation and entrepreneurship to the region, and how can we catalyze both our main streets and our commercial corridors. So since 2015, we have closed roughly about 55 loans and about $55 million of investments, totaling over $100 million of project costs that really, generated, we've supported, roughly about 75 businesses and created over 1,000 jobs. Next slide, please. So it was important, for us to think about how we could support businesses and nonprofits when the crisis hit. And really, developments of funds like this really require a mega community approach. And I want to first give a shout out to Tim and Christina and the great team at EDA, because as they mentioned, they really provided a foundation for us to create this fund by providing us, a credit enhancement support that we can go out and raise capital so that we can develop a product that can serve the needs of the community. So we've targeted a minimum of $15 million raised, and we're well on our way to do that. And a little bit about this program, as I mentioned, it's really designed to try to stabilize small businesses and nonprofits negatively impacted by the crisis. We all know how important small businesses are to our economy. They make up 50% of the employment in New Jersey. They're really the backbone of our main streets and commercial corridors. And likewise, nonprofits, right? How important they are. They represent, over 10% of the workforce in New Jersey. And of course, the demands and services for our nonprofits now have never been greater. So it's really important that we think about how we could develop a tool to help them during this period. So we created the Garden State Relief Fund, and it's designed to provide, loan amounts from $10,000 to $75,000 to help businesses and nonprofits stabilize their operations. We've really tried to make this program incredibly flexible. It's, in terms of some of the underwriting, we have very flexible standards. We ask for just a minimum debt service coverage ratio of 1, which is below our normal standards, minimum credit scores of 625. And as you can imagine, the demand for this product has been great. And a really important consideration of this fund, especially as it relates to Gloucester, Cumberland, and Salem counties, is the interest rate on these loans for small businesses is 0% for the 3-year period. And really that is because of one reason, and that's been the incredible partnership we have with the Pascal Sykes Foundation and Fran Sykes, who have provided us the support to bring down this interest rate to 0% on the loans for all small businesses in the footprint. We've made some gains in economic development in the area. Again, it takes a big partnership to do that. And the question is, how do we continue to lock down those gains and stabilize those businesses that are being greatly affected now by the crisis? Next slide, please. So the demand for the work we've seen already, and we're open for business and we have money available. Already we've had, roughly about 73 businesses apply to us for about $4.5 million in funding. We've closed roughly over 2 million of these already. Our goal right now is that from application to funding, to try to get it done in 14 days, recognizing how important this funding is to our businesses and nonprofits. I just ask now that people be a little bit patient because, as we imagine, the demand's been great statewide. As of this morning, I believe we had 375 applications. So we understand that it's incumbent upon us to try to move through this quickly. So we're doing everything we can, but we've already experienced great demand, and we're serving a wide range of businesses and nonprofits in the region. We're serving a lot of minority-owned businesses, low to moderate income-owned businesses, and so we expect to continue to try to play a role here in going forward. So I just wanted to, again, if anybody is interested, it's on. They could apply through the New Jersey Community Capital website. Everything can be done online, and again, I want to thank, first of all, our partners, and the NJEDA has just been remarkable. Partners like the Pascal Sykes Foundation, partners like other financial institutions that have invested in this fund. These initiatives, as we all know, takes a mega community approach. It does take these partnerships to make them work. So again, thank you for allowing me to spend a few minutes with you today. And Christina, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you so much, Wayne. We appreciate your presentation. Really great information that not a lot of people are probably familiar with. So I hope we appreciate you being with us as always. So last but certainly not least, we have Harry Stone, who is the president of the Cooperative Business Assistant Corporation, which is located in Camden. It's a micro and small business lending outlet. So Harry, I'll just turn the floor over to you to give your remarks.
Thank you very much, Christina. I appreciate that. And I want to thank the South Jersey Chamber, the other chambers that are participating, as well as our other co-presenters today, such as the New Jersey EDA, who has made a lot of the programs that are discussed today available. So I just wanted to give you some brief updates on the programs that CBAC is working on. CBAC, a little bit by background, is a nonprofit lending organization, a CDFI. We've been in existence since 1987, and we cover South Jersey, Burlington County down to Cape May County and the counties in between. We are primarily a small business lender, and our main product are microloans, which run anywhere from $1,000 up to $50,000, but we do have other loan programs for greater amounts. We are currently working on obtaining funding for new programs that we're doing through the New Jersey EDA CDFI program. We are working on additional funding from the U.S. Small Business Administration. The U.S. EDA also announced a program approximately 2 weeks ago where they are providing additional funds to revolving loan operators for their programs in Southern New Jersey. We currently have 3 programs in South Jersey, and we have applied for additional funding for those programs, and we should be hearing within the next couple of weeks the outcome of that application. We do understand, though, that it's something that USEDA is very committed to making happen, and it should be very soon when we hear about that additional funding. We're also working with the New Jersey EDA on obtaining additional funding in addition to their support that they've given us with loan guarantees and interest buy-down funds. We are also working very actively with all the counties that are represented here today. We have great working relationships with their economic development agencies and the officials within those areas. And we have had a long-standing relationship with these counties where we've actually operated and continue to operate revolving loan funds for Gloucester County, Cumberland County. And as part of the additional funding we're getting and the support for the New Jersey EDA, we're looking at leveraging those revolving loan funds together with our other money to provide very low cost funding. As Tim said earlier from the New Jersey EDA, the interest rates on those programs will be less than 3.75, and the terms up to 5 years. So it'll be a great source for providing working capital to these companies. Another comment I just want to make is that we're hearing quite a bit of discussion from our customers as we're discussing financing and different sources of funding for them. And one thing that has come up is the taxability of some of the SBA programs, whether it is the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, regarding whether or not expenses paid with those proceeds from a forgivable loan will be tax deductible or not. Also, questions coming to us are with SBA products such as the microloan product that we are very active in, and other 7A programs, that some of those programs are making loan payments for the customers for several months, and whether or not those payments will become taxable to the small business owner. I just want to mention that there is no definitive announcement or pronouncement, I guess I should say, on the taxability of payments that are made for SBA borrowers under their various programs, and that is being discussed right now. So I would suggest to the business community, excuse me, anything that you can do to request that our representatives, Congress, Senate, to support working together with the small businesses with regards to the taxability of the proceeds from some of these loans. I know that there's a lot up in the air right now, and as Cheryl mentioned before, even with extending the time period for PPP use of funds, it's all being worked on right now. So I think that's real important. The bottom line is, with the taxability of any of these programs, that you're still ahead, way ahead, even if some of the proceed money or all the proceed money becomes taxable, because you're only paying taxes on that amount. It's only a percentage of the amount you're receiving. So it's still in your best interest to take advantage of the programs, even if it is taxable interest to you, or payments to your business. The other thought is that with all that we've been facing with the economic challenges the past several months, that your taxable income very well may be down this year, so that any tax implications from any of the federal programs that you're receiving funding from and or state, that it's very possible that your tax bracket would be lower and the impact would be minimum. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We're also working with banks for additional funding, and we have a lot in the pipeline that we're working on. We are currently working on about 100 applications for the CBAC 2020 Recovery Loan Program through the New Jersey EDA. And we just began taking applications on that last week, and we are now in the process of reviewing many of them. And we expect to have money going out within the next week. So we're excited about all we have going on, and we're here for you at CBAC, and we look forward to our continued relationships with all the chambers that are represented today, as well as the business community and other lenders today. So I thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Oh, let me start my video. Thank you so much, Harry. We appreciate it. Appreciate all the good work you or your organization and organizations like Wayne as well are doing for the small business community here in New Jersey. So at this point, I'm going to ask all of our panelists to be prepared. We are going to jump into the Q&A section of the program. As I mentioned, I've been, taking all the questions that have come through the chat and populating them. So we're going to tick through some of them. I do just want to remind you again that if you do have a question as relates to the Department of Labor, feel free to throw that in the chat as well, and I'll be sure to get an answer back for you on that front as well. So just a quick reminder on that. So we had, and Tim and Christina, thank you, because I know as you guys were presenting, you were going ahead and answering some of the questions in the chat, but I do want to run through them for the greater group, just so all the participants can hear the answers to the questions in case they weren't following the chat. So Tim, you already talked a little bit about 501c6s, and I appreciate that question being asked. It was not me, because our chamber is actually a 501c6. So thank you for the explanation on that. But that was a question we had in the chat as it relates to why EDA's programs are not eligible for 501c6s. So thank you. But there was a question in the chat regarding for-profit childcare centers. They weren't eligible. Are they eligible for the program this time around?
Generally, yes. They're going to have under 25 employees. Many of the bigger for-profits have more staff than that. So generally, they'll be eligible on an industry basis. The size of the organization will matter.
Sure. Okay, great. So when will the application be available? That's a question we had in the chat. I think you may have touched on it, but do you have that timeline yet for it?
We're thinking the early part of that second full week of June, so June 8th, 9th, somewhere in there. But we want to make sure we're finalizing the application. We're translating it to Spanish. We're working on the language support for this as well. We're going to want to publish the application in a static format at least a week in advance of that, so that everyone, I've been describing this is an open book test, and so we're going to publish the entire application as soon as it's ready. My guess is that's very early next week. And then at least 7 days hence will be when we open the window. So because it's first come, first serve, there will be a rush for applications. We want to make sure everyone gets a chance to understand what documents they're going to need to pull together, what kind of information they're going to need. This will be a little different than the first application, although not much more complex. So my best guess is June 8th, 9th, somewhere in there.
Okay. We had someone that threw in the chat that they had applied for the initial loan program, that the small business emergency loan, back in April, and was told at the time that they applied that was already exhausted. So do they have to reapply for that? The second round is grants. Can you just clarify that one way or the other?
Yeah, so generally you're going to need to reapply for round two. Which is an imperfect answer, particularly for the folks who are on the wait list from round one in the grant program. But it's a fairness question around, the folks who are in the backlog would have a big head start on the newly eligible applicants, and so we've got to make a bit of a restart. The good news is the first round application took folks on average between 15 and 20 minutes. My guess is this will be 20 to 25 minutes. So time out of people's busy day, but it's not like applying to college or going and getting a mortgage or something. It's it's a manageable exercise. It's manageable. And so the applicants for the loan would certainly have to apply for this. Depending on, I assume anyone who applied for the loan is likely eligible for the grant. And so they should apply as well. Yeah.
Okay, we have a few more for EDA, but let's switch gears and go to Cheryl. Cheryl, if you don't mind, we have a few questions here for you. Just, can you very quickly, for those that are unfamiliar, talk about what the EIDL loan is? Some people may not be familiar. I think PPP is definitely very familiar to folks, but EIDL is not. Do you mind kind of walking through what that program is for the group?
Sure. And EIDL stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. That is a loan program that comes out when there is a disaster. So we are familiar with Superstorm Sandy with both the physical injury loans in which the SBA lent to people directly, and that at that time it was both residents and businesses. EIDL is a separate loan, and that is for economic injury, and that is just to businesses, not to residences. Under the CARES Act, businesses that have revenues under $2 million are considered already economically injured, so they don't have to prove it. The application portal, however, is currently closed. We don't know if it's going to open up again, but that is where you've heard of the $10,000, up to $10,000 EIDL advances had occurred for people waiting in line for these EIDL loans. It did open up for agricultural, like farms, but currently, as I said, the portal is closed for small businesses And they're just right now kind of maxed out and going through and seeing if there's additional funding that would be available, and then they would be able to open the portal back up. It all depends on congressional funding. But it is a loan that, as I said, it's economic injury.
Yeah, that actually is helpful, Cheryl, because we had another question in the chat as to why the EIDL loan is only available for agricultural businesses, but you just answered that in your question. So we will.
Yeah,
skip-
yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yep, because you're just waiting on additional funding at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a question here regarding seasonal businesses. So a seasonal business who haven't started payroll yet, and we've seen this question a few times, because they can't open, they're so closed here in New Jersey. Can they delay the first pay period until they are open and use the alternate covered period to extend the use time frame? This is something we're getting a lot, especially when we do this form for Cape May County and Atlantic County businesses. Can you get into that a little?
Sure. The short answer is no. You would think you can't use the alternate, how you qualified for the disbursement period. It has to be starting on the day the loans are dispersed. And once a loan is approved by a lender, the lender has 10 days to disperse that loan, or the loan gets canceled. So on that date of disbursement, or it can actually be the first day of that following pay period if a borrower is on a 2-week pay period, that they have 8 weeks to, even if they delay it. So if they delay it by 2 weeks, then they only have 6 weeks. So you have 8 weeks to, pay your employees. And I certainly understand that question of not being open. That I am currently seeing legislation in which they are even thinking about doubling that period from 8 to 16 weeks. But I currently, as it stands today, it is that 8 weeks, and you cannot delay it. But stay tuned, because as I said, I'm seeing legislation going through, and I'm hoping that that 8 weeks will be extended, especially for the Jersey Shore community.
Sure. Thank you for that, Cheryl. This is for Tim and Cheryl both. So the question is, what programs can we participate in if we've already received the PPP? Does that exclude them from either state programs or other federal programs, or no?
For the EDA, short answer is
No.
no. Yeah. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah. Oh, sure. So just think of it as double dipping or not. So federal funds are a separate thing, and state funds are a separate thing. So if you can't, for example, if you do have an economic injury disaster loan, you couldn't use it for payroll and then also use your federal PPP loan for payroll. So then you go over to the state, and the state is completely separate. The only time, and this is where confusion has occurred, is that during Sandy, the federal government gave the states money to disperse, and that's where you weren't able to kind of double dip. But the state is utilizing their own monies to go to small businesses, so that's not considered double dipping. Tim, do you want to add to that?
Thanks, Cheryl. So it's a little bit more complicated because now we are using some federal funding. So we through this new round, we will be doing what's known as a duplication of benefits analysis. What Cheryl said about double dipping applies there, meaning you can't get, if your April payroll was covered once, you can't get your April payroll covered again. The bad news, which translates into a slightly bit of good news for this question, is most folks have so much impact that have not been able to get the resources they need that they're going to have no problem demonstrating continued, need and expenses that are COVID centric. And so my guess is most folks will be okay.
Got it. Thank you both for that. We'll get back to some EDA focused questions. Tim and Christina, if a 501c3 is an all volunteer organization, would they be eligible to apply for the new grant program?
Well, thank you, Christina, for unmuting, because I was going to make you answer that one. I think the answer is yeah, but I don't think they're going to get a ton of resources because they're probably not likely to have a lot of W-2s. But Christina?
Yeah, so Ira, I actually sent you an email. I would need a little bit more details as far as who's actually running that. And I would ask you to look at your formation documents and operating agreement too, because we would want a little bit more detail behind that. But check your email. So I did respond to you, and we can chat offline about that. So I can get you, I would think at least 1,000 probably would be eligible for whoever's running that entity. But if there's no other employees, then that's all we could look to really, offer the grant for.
Got it. Thank you, Christina and Tim. Simple question: when the application is available, where will it be located online? Where can people find it?
It'll be at the website I referenced a few times earlier, CV, as in coronavirus, cv.business.nj.gov. It'll probably also be linked to and pointed to all manner of other sites, but that's the place it'll be where you will go and do your work.
Gotcha. We have a question here regarding the application process. So as we already talked about, obviously the first round was oversubscribed so quickly, which just, again, points to the drastic need that's out there for small businesses. Some folks had problems with the actual application process. I know EDA has put a lot of different mechanisms in place, the eligibility wizard tool, so folks can get as prepared as possible. We had someone in the chat that mentioned that they had a hard time just loading the application. Are you expecting that kind of same load of folks going ahead and applying? And if you had any technical glitches, is that something that you've worked to maybe correct this time around?
Yeah, I'm sorry for the person who had that challenge. On the system side, we didn't have many, if any, reports of people being able to access the site. That might have been a problem with that person's browser or computer or whatever. I'm sorry that happened. We ran a simulation of if we got 10,000 applications in an hour, which we thought was like a comically large simulation to run, and that turned out to be the scenario that we had, and the system held up, and so didn't really have much on the technical side. Again, I'm sure there were individual circumstances. Sounds like the person who asked the question had that. I'm sorry about that, but hopefully we'll touch wood that we'll have similar success with this as we go.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that this was actually the issue, but as someone who grew up in Cumberland County myself, they, and Salem County, there are, just general broadband issues down that way, which is something that all small businesses struggle with, which is why, the closures have really impacted Cumberland and Salem businesses a little bit harder because some of them don't have the mechanism to be able to get online and maybe sells their services that way. But no, thank you for that, Tim. That's a good point of clarity on that. Cheryl, I have one or two more for you, and then I have one or two more for Tim, then I think we're ready to wrap it up. Cheryl, we have an individual in the chat that is a sole proprietor. It is an LLC, and they are, a single person and only caregiver. And actually, unfortunately and tragically, the person they were caring for did get COVID and did pass away. So this person has not applied for anything. Given their circumstances, could they apply for PPP? EIDL's obviously closed right now, or is this really a PUA claim? And I know PUA is not really your area of expertise, but if you can comment or give some guidance, that would be appreciated.
I am not sure. I've never gotten a question in which the person's client has died, but I could look at this offline if they want to contact me directly. I don't want to just throw out incorrect information on whether they're eligible or not with a special circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Cheryl, we'll make sure to get you that individual's email address on the back end so you can connect.
Perfect. Thank you.
So one more question for you. The question is, if you received a PPP loan and an EIDL loan, are you still going to be able to apply for PUA? And again, I know PUA does not really fall under your purview, but I'm sure you get this question, so I figured throw it out there for you.
Yeah, it's just PUA is completely out of my swim lane, so I can't comment on that.
Okay. So we're going to close with this last question for EDA, Tim. The question is about credit lines or backing credit lines. Does NGEDA do anything in that realm, or is that just more, your private banking entities?
We do, but it's mostly via partnering with folks like Wayne and Harry, and some of the for-profit banks that are out there. So I don't know if Wayne or Harry or Christina wants to jump in on that. Short answer is yes, we do that, or we do it with partners.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
This is Wayne. The EDA has provided us credit support, so the lines of credit that we could offer to small businesses and nonprofits are supported by them. And that's what has given us the ability to go out and raise more capital and even at a lower cost. So that credit support that Tim referenced and Christina mentioned is really a huge help in our ability to offer lines of credit.
Hello, this is Harry Stone from CBAC. We do not use line or have lines of credit available at CBAC. We only do term loan financing.
Okay, thank you for that clarity, and thank you, Tim, also as well. So I think we're going to close it on that note. I think we did get to most of the questions. If you did have a question for Department of Labor, don't worry, I will get that question taken care of for you. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, thank you to our participants. We've done this now and touched really every county in South Jersey, which is really tremendous. So, South Jersey sometimes has a little bit of a chip on its shoulder, saying that,
what?
You never heard that before, Tim, right?
Never from you, Christina.
Never from me directly, personally, multiple times. So no, we really appreciate the time that has been spent really making sure small businesses in South Jersey have this really valuable information. I want to thank our partners today, the Bridgeton Area Chamber of Commerce, Cumberland County Improvement Authority, Gloucester County Chamber of Commerce, Greater Millville Chamber of Commerce, Salem County Chamber of Commerce, and of course, the Greater Vineland Chamber of Commerce. And again, I would be remiss if I did not give another huge thank you to our sponsor of today's program, Wells Fargo, and our dear friend, John Zimmerman and his team. Thank you so much for your ongoing support of the Chamber's programming as we continue to navigate the COVID crisis on behalf of our members. So thank you all again for joining us. I appreciate all of your participation. Everyone have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you online soon.
Be safe, be well, everybody. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.